In the summer of 1977, a single newspaper article sent shockwaves through the Kremlin that no missile had ever produced. The Washington Post published an exposé revealing that the United States was developing a new kind of nuclear weapon, one that broke every rule the world had come to accept about what nuclear weapons were supposed to do. It didn't primarily destroy buildings, it didn't flatten cities, it killed people, specifically, precisely, efficiently. It killed soldiers inside tanks, it killed troops in bunkers, and then it left the landscape largely intact, ready to be occupied by whoever came next. The Soviets called it the capitalist bomb, and they were terrified of it. Within weeks of that article appearing in print, the KGB had activated one of the most ambitious covert influence operations in Cold War history. The CIA would later estimate that the Soviet Union spent $100 million trying to stop this weapon, not by building a countermeasure, not by developing their own version, but by manipulating Western public opinion so completely that America would cancel the program itself. They would use front organizations, planted stories, coordinated protests, and the personal intervention of Soviet leader Leonid Brezhnev to turn American and European citizens against their own government's defense program. And for a time, it worked. This is the story of the neutron bomb, the weapon that frightened the Soviet Union more than anything America had built since the atomic bomb, and the extraordinary secret campaign Moscow launched to make sure it never reached the battlefield. To understand why the neutron bomb produced such a specific and intense panic in the Kremlin, you have to understand the military situation in Europe in the 1970s. The Cold War in Europe was not a war of equal forces facing each other across a line. It was a war of profound imbalance. The Soviet Union and its Warsaw Pact allies had assembled, over decades, an enormous conventional military force in Eastern Europe. Tens of thousands of tanks, armored vehicles, artillery pieces, and infantry divisions positioned along the Central Front in Germany, ready to push west if the order ever came. NATO's commanders, looking at those numbers, understood that a conventional defense of Western Europe against a full Soviet ground assault was, at best, a desperate proposition. The strategy NATO had developed to compensate was nuclear. If Soviet tanks rolled west, NATO would use tactical nuclear weapons, smaller, battlefield-sized nuclear devices, to stop them. The Soviets knew this. They had planned for it. Their doctrine assumed that any war in Europe would go nuclear quickly, and their forces were trained and equipped to fight in a nuclear environment. What they had not planned for, what no one had fully planned for, was a nuclear weapon that targeted soldiers specifically while leaving the physical infrastructure of the battlefield largely intact. A weapon that could reach inside a tank and kill the crew with radiation while leaving the tank itself functional. A weapon that could clear a bunker of its defenders without reducing the bunker to rubble. That was the neutron bomb. Technically known as an enhanced radiation weapon, it was designed to maximize the release of neutron radiation while minimizing the blast and heat effects that characterized conventional nuclear weapons. A standard nuclear bomb of a given size destroyed everything within a large radius: buildings, vehicles, people, infrastructure. The neutron bomb of equivalent size directed most of its energy as radiation, killing living things within a much more precise area, while causing far less physical destruction. Against a Soviet tank assault, the implications were stark. A neutron warhead detonated above a column of Soviet armor would irradiate the crews inside their vehicles, killing them within days, if not hours, while leaving the tanks themselves intact and the roads and bridges needed to advance still usable. For the Soviet military, which had built its European strategy around the overwhelming power of its armored forces, this was not merely an inconvenience. It was a direct threat to the foundational assumption of their entire war plan. Their tanks, their single greatest advantage in a European land war, became potential death traps the moment American artillery units equipped with neutron warheads took the field. The weapon didn't just change the military balance, it threatened to make the Soviet Union's most expensive and carefully prepared military asset, tens of thousands of tanks and the troops to crew them, strategically worthless. When the Washington Post article appeared in June 1977, the Kremlin's reaction was immediate and visceral. Brezhnev and his generals understood exactly what was at stake. The public debate that erupted in America and Western Europe over the morality of a weapon designed specifically to kill people while preserving property was, from Moscow's perspective, not an obstacle. It was an opportunity. The same moral arguments that made Western citizens uncomfortable with the neutron bomb could be amplified, coordinated, and directed to produce exactly the political outcome the Kremlin needed: cancellation of the program before it ever reached deployment. What followed was, by the CIA's own assessment, one of the most sophisticated covert influence operations the Soviet Union had ever mounted. The CIA studied the campaign in real time and produced a classified analysis that September. The conclusion was unambiguous: the volume of propaganda against the neutron bomb, the timing of its appearance across multiple countries simultaneously, the identical themes appearing in publications that had no obvious connection to each other, and the coordination between Soviet state media, Eastern European outlets, and ostensibly independent Western organizations all pointed to a single source. Moscow had activated every available channel: print media, broadcast media, front organizations, peace movements, political parties with Soviet connections, and pointed them all at the same target. The operation had 3 phases. The first, running through late 1977, involved flooding Western European media with coverage framing the neutron bomb as a uniquely immoral weapon, the bomb that killed people but saved property, a weapon designed by a capitalist system that valued things over human lives. The framing was effective because it contained a kernel of genuine moral discomfort that many Western citizens already felt. The Soviets didn't invent that discomfort. They amplified it, coordinated it, and directed it toward a specific political outcome. The CIA later noted that some individuals who participated in anti-neutron bomb activities had no idea they were repeating Soviet talking points. The operation was sophisticated enough to seed ideas through channels that appeared entirely independent. The second phase involved direct political intervention at the highest levels. Brezhnev personally wrote letters to Western leaders, framing the neutron bomb as a destabilizing escalation that threatened the entire framework of arms control negotiations. He appealed to Carter's genuine desire for arms reduction and his discomfort with nuclear weapons. He argued that deploying the neutron bomb would make any progress on strategic arms limitation impossible. The letters were calibrated precisely to exploit the political pressures Carter was already feeling from within his own party and from European allies who were nervous about public opinion on their home soil. The third phase targeted West Germany specifically. Germany was the country where neutron warheads would be deployed, the country whose territory would be the battlefield if a European war came, and the country whose public opinion was most consequential for the program's survival. Soviet-coordinated peace organizations staged large protests. Politicians with Soviet connections raised parliamentary objections. German Chancellor Helmut Schmidt, who had expended enormous political capital convincing his own party to support the deployment, found himself isolated, pushing for a weapon that his American partner seemed increasingly unwilling to commit to, while Soviet-amplified public opposition grew louder by the week. Carter was already conflicted. He had genuine moral reservations about nuclear weapons of all kinds, and the neutron bomb's specific design, maximizing human casualties while minimizing physical destruction, troubled him in ways he found difficult to set aside. As Soviet propaganda amplified Western opposition, and Brezhnev's letters emphasized the arms control implications, Carter began to waver. His own advisors were divided. The military wanted the weapon. Some of his political advisors worried about the domestic and international political cost of deploying it. And all the while, the Soviet influence operation kept the pressure rising. In April 1978, Carter announced that the United States was deferring production of the neutron bomb. The program was not formally canceled. It was suspended, pending arms control negotiations with the Soviet Union. But the effect was the same. The weapon would not be built. It would not be deployed. The Soviet armored divisions in Eastern Europe would not face neutron warheads in the artillery batteries of NATO forces on the German plain. In Moscow, the reaction was something close to relief, followed almost immediately by a strategic miscalculation. Having succeeded in stopping the neutron bomb through covert political manipulation, the Soviet leadership apparently concluded that the same approach could work again. Within a year, they were running a similar campaign against NATO's plans to deploy longer-range missiles in Europe. That campaign also produced massive protests, but this time it did not produce cancellation. Instead, it hardened NATO's resolve and contributed to a cycle of escalation that would culminate in the early 1980s, when the arrival of American Pershing, 2 missiles in Europe, far more capable than anything the neutron bomb had represented, gave Soviet military planners something genuinely new to lose sleep over. There is a final irony in the neutron bomb story that the Soviets preferred not to examine too closely. On November 17, 1978, just months after Carter's announcement suspending the American program, the Soviet Union secretly detonated its own enhanced radiation weapon in a nuclear test. Brezhnev, who had spent a year denouncing the neutron bomb as immoral, a capitalist weapon, a threat to all humanity, had authorized the development and testing of a Soviet version. The propaganda had called it a crime against civilization. The test proved Moscow had wanted one for themselves all along. Ronald Reagan restarted the American neutron bomb production program in 1981. By then, the strategic landscape had shifted again, and the weapon that had once paralyzed the Kremlin with fear faded gradually from the center of the arms race. But the episode left something behind. A demonstration of what the Soviet Union was capable of when it turned its resources toward covert political warfare rather than military confrontation. $100 million, a global influence network, coordinated protests across a dozen countries, personal letters from the General Secretary, and a Western president who canceled his own weapon. The Soviets never fired a shot. They didn't need to.